We learn in our oral tradition that there are 903 types of death, 903 different ways for us to die. In this week's Torah portion, we read about the death of Miriam and the death of Aaron. Miriam at the beginning of the Torah portion and Aaron at the end of the Torah portion. And we learn from our oral tradition again that they die by the kiss of death, kiss of God. God kisses our holy siblings such that that is the cause of their death. And again, it teaches us in the oral tradition that that kind of death is likened unto removing a hair from a vat of milk. That if there was a hair inside a container with milk in it, that to pull out the hair is a very gentle, a very smooth, a very painless kind of an extraction of the hair from the milk. So too, the kiss of death causes the soul that's inside the body to be extracted in that same way, likened unto iron filings that immediately get attracted back to the magnet when it's in the vicinity. And so too, this kiss of God to these holy siblings causes the soul to be so attracted back to the source and so desirous of connection that it cannot stay tethered in the body. The intimate kiss of God is a revelation of God that is so powerful, just like the iron filings are attracted back to the magnet, and so too the soul is attracted back to the source. And our holy siblings, Miriam, Aaron, and Moses later on, die by the kiss of God. What a lovely way to go if you have to go. When Miriam dies, we learn that the water dries up, that because of her, the water was coming out of the well and sustaining the people while they were traveling through the desert. They were traveling through the desert, they needed water, and at the beginning of their sojourn, God tells Moses to take the staff and to hit the rock, which is what he does at the beginning of their sojourn. 40 years earlier, Moses hits the rock to extract the water, and it's in Miriam's merit, because of her, that the water sustains the people, both physically and spiritually, through their sojourns through the desert. And we learn also that Miriam would sing to the rock. That the Midrash teaches us that by singing to the rock and teaching this song to the heads of the tribes, of the leaders of the people, that they also sang to the rock, and the rock brought forth this wonderful water, and the people were sustained. When she dies, the water dries up. There's no more water. And the well that was sustaining the people is dried up, and the people start to complain. We don't hear about them crying. We hear about them complaining. They immediately complain to Moses and Aaron that they don't have water. So these siblings, Aaron and Moses, have just lost their sister. And if you go look back into our Torah and you look back to what happened, Miriam was like a mother to Moses. When Miriam and Moses and Aaron's parents separate because of the decree that Pharaoh is going to kill all the baby boys, it's Miriam that goes to her parents and argues and says, no, you can't do this. You have to continue to have children. And they come back together, and Moses is born, and he's born 3 months early, and he's secreted away. And after the 3 months are up, and now the Egyptians are going to come looking, and we remember Moses is put into a little ark, and Miriam takes him and puts him in the river Nile. She puts him in the water, and she watches over him. And when Basia, the daughter of Pharaoh, comes to take baby Moses, that it's Miriam that makes sure that their mother, that Moses' mother, is the one that's there to nurse him. She watches over him. She takes care of him. She looks after him. She is like a mother to him. She's just died. And now the people are complaining. There's no time to mourn. There's no time to grieve. They're complaining. And God says to Moses and Aaron, take your staff and go to the rock and speak to the rock. The directive now is to speak to the rock, not to hit the rock. Moses goes to the rock and he calls the people rebels. He's angry perhaps. He's grieving perhaps. And he hits the rock, which is not the directive that God had for him. The directive was to speak to the rock, and he hits the rock. And many of our commentators suggest that Moses was an authoritarian kind of a leader, that he wasn't the leader that was the right leader to take this generation into the land of Israel. This generation needed a leader who would speak, to the rock, that would speak to the people, that would be compassionate, that would use language, that would be gentler, wouldn't be a harsh, hit the rock kind of leader, but would be more of a gentle, soother, speak to the people kind of leader. When the people first came out of Egypt, they were used to slavery. When the people first came out of Egypt, they were like children following God and going into the desert and following Moses and Aaron and didn't know what was happening to them. And they were like children. Perhaps that's the more appropriate kind of leadership that was needed back then. But the leadership now for this generation, this is not the generation that came out of Egypt. These are the children. And as much as they're saying, take us back to Egypt, they were not in Egypt. This was the children who had inherited the stories of what had happened to their parents. But this was a generation poised on the cusp of going into the land of Israel, needed a leader that would speak to them, not a leader that would, so to speak, hit the rock, be that kind of leader. And so Moses is not allowed, the consequence of him hitting the rock is for him to stay in the desert with the first generation, to die out in the desert, and to not go with the people into the land. He was not the kind of leader that the people needed. And it's interesting because often we say it's so sad that Moses didn't get to go into the land, that he didn't get to merit to be that kind of person. But in our own lives, there are so many things that we pray for, so many things that we want, so many things that we feel are entitled to. And yet, at the end of the day, it's not up to us. We don't get, people die and things happen to us that are out of our control, and we don't trust that this is the right thing, that Moses staying in the desert and not entering the land is the right thing. And so too, we should also, at some level, try to accept that things that happen to us are the right thing to happen. So the 2 points that I want to bring out from this week's Torah portion are that when Miriam dies and the water dries up, and when Aaron dies, and the clouds of glory, these protective clouds that sustained them, that protected them, and were around the encampment, that protected them, that dissipated when Aaron died, because in Aaron's merit they had this protection, and when he dies the protection's gone, and they complain about the manna, and then the snakes that are there start to bite the people. And they complain again, like complaining about being bitten by snakes. Right, because they didn't recognize that these clouds that were surrounding them were also protecting them. They didn't recognize the value of the water until the water was gone. They didn't value the clouds. They didn't recognize how important the clouds were until the clouds were gone. And so too, I wonder, in our lives, we have so many things that we have in our lives. Can we appreciate them without the absence of them? Can we appreciate them while we have them, and not just when we don't have them? That the people complain they don't have water, the people complain they don't have protection, but were they grateful for the water, and were they grateful for the protection while they had it? So those, I think, are the 2 lessons. One is to be grateful for the things that we have, and not just when we don't have them, but actually while we still have them, that we could learn to be grateful and recognize the blessing of the things that we have in our lives. And the second thing is this approach to leadership, the way in which Moses is not the right leader to take the people. The people were more infantile when they left Egypt. They needed to have a different kind of leader. And now they're more adults, so to speak, and they need a leader that's going to talk to them, that's going to cajole them, persuade them, use language, be gentler, perhaps sing to them like Miriam sang to the rock. And perhaps that's the kind of interactions that we want to have with other people, are ones that are not harsh and not authoritarian, but they're very soft and gentle and kind and loving. And that's the kind of leader that needed to take the Jewish people into the land of Israel. And that's the kind of interactions that we need to have with each other. So my blessing to us is that we do feel grateful for things we have and recognize the blessings of things we have while we have them, and that we are able to be in relationship with each other in ways that's appropriate, and that we are able to not be harsh, and to be kind and gentle and use our words in kind and loving ways.